The name Kulmbach for a small settlement was first documented between 1028 and 1040. Thanks to the convenient location on the Main, the community grew rapidly and was finally fortified with the construction of the Plassenburg. In 1231, Kulmbach received the city rights. This was followed by a very eventful history, in which the city was under the rule of changing princes, counts and dukes, including the Hohenzollers, who ruled Kulmbach for more than 500 years, until Napoleon displaced them in 1806. Twice the city of Kulmbach and the Plassenburg were largely destroyed and had to be rebuilt, in 1430 by burning Hussites and 1553 during a battle in the course of the War of the Federal States. Scenes of this fight can be admired by visitors to the Kulmbacher Zinnsoldatenmuseum, reenacted in miniature format. In 1806, Kulmbach was under the rule of the Prussians, but was then occupied by Bavarian troops. After the surrender of the Prussians, the occupiers sanded the defensive walls of the Plassenburg in order to make it unusable as a military fortress. In 1810, Kulmbach was finally officially awarded to the Bavarians. During the Third Reich, the NSDAP established the Reichsguild der Deutschen Technik in the Plassenburg fortress and connected the city to the motorway network. Between 1902 and 1976, numerous incorporations took place, through which Kulmbach grew strongly and became today's great district town of Kulmbach. Built around 1135, the Plassenburg, an old Hohenzollern fortress above the city, is the landmark of Kulmbach. The impressive Renaissance building is especially famous for its beautiful courtyard and houses 4 museums that tourists can visit during their visit. Annual highlights for visitors and locals are also the 3-day Old Town Festival and the Kulmbach Beer Week. This has not 7, but 9 days and offers all kinds of other Franconian delicacies in addition to the Kulmbach beers. The annual motorcycle star ride of the city in April provides a change in the Kulmbach event calendar. The meeting of more than 40,000 bikers from all over the world has now developed into the largest motorcycle meeting in southern Germany and also attracts non-bikers with impressive stunt shows. As the hometown of the largest tin figure museum in the world, Kulmbach also organizes the International Pewter Figure Exchange every 2 years, where experts can exchange figures and expertise. Around 900. The first germ cells of Kulmbach arise at the Grunwer and in the Spiegel. The Fraunhof must have belonged to the Babenberger, the later counts of Schweinfurt. (1057). After the extinction of the Schweinfurt counts, whose dominion initially included the Kulmbach region, the Kulmbach land ownership fell to the counts of Diesen, Andex. 1135. Kulmbach received the market rights and was elevated to the city. Mention of a, first, West Plassenburg, which can be identified with a precursor plant above today's Plassenburg on the Buchberg. 1148–1149. First mention of servants who managed the Plassenburg. They are called Plassenburger. 1174. First mention of a Kulmbach priest. A Luitpold of Kulmbach is attested in a document. 1230. The Obstorfer world map lists the Plassenburg. 1231. Kulmbach retains the city rights and is fortified with a city wall. The parish right of Melkendorf also passed to the municipal Petrokirch. 1248. Rule in the region by the Thuringian counts of Orlamund and completion of the Plassenburg to a fortress. 1260. The rule of the Plassenburg finally falls to the house of the counts of Orlamund from Thuringia. In the first years, the new building of the Plassenburg, which was still started by the Moranians, as well as the Himmelkron monastery were completed. 1340. Rule the Zollern, Burggraf of Nuremberg. From 1417 Margraves of Brandenburg, Kulmbach. According to estimates, about 1,500 to 2,000 people lived in Kulmbach. 1361. Count Frederick V. receives from Emperor Charles IV the right to mint gold coins in Kulmbach. 1363. The Burgraves of Hohenzollern become imperial princes. 1393. First mention of a Latin school near the Petrokirch. 1398. After the death of Burgrave Frederick V, the Frankish possessions of the Hohenzollern are separated. Johann III receives the northern region ob dem Geberg, with Kulmbach, Bayreuth and Hof. A Urbar created this year provides information about the economic structure of Kulmbach. Between 1,500 and 2,000 inhabitants are likely to have lived in Kulmbach. Kulmbach was minted. 1415. The Hohenzoller Friedrich von Ansbach Kulmbach receives the electoral dignity and the Mark Brandenburg from King Sigismund at the Reichstag in Constance. Since then, the Hohenzollern call themselves Margraves of Brandenburg-Kulmbach. The Plassenburg is managed by a captain of the mountains. 1430. Hussite storm and first devastation of the city. In the course of the reconstruction, among other things, the late Gothic new building of St. Petri, Petrokirch, was built. 1445. Dr. Friedrich Sesselmann from Kulmbach became Chancellor of the Mark Brandenburg until 1483. 1456. A humanist school is verifiable on the Plassenburg, which was led by a man named Origius. 1483. After Sesselmann, a second Kulmbacher takes over the office of Chancellor in the Mark Brandenburg until 1509, Sigismund's era. 1495. An ordinance prohibits citizens of Bayreuth from pilgrimage to Mangersruth, as the plague had broken out in Bayreuth. This ordinance is the first of its kind in Upper Franconia. 1497. For the collection of the Gemeinen Pfennig, a tax list is drawn up in Kulmbach, which reflects an early impression of the population structure of the city. 1501. Margrave Albrecht is born on the Plassenburg. He later became the Grand Master of the Teutonic Order and transformed the religious state into a secular, Protestant duchy. 1509. Sebastian Stüblinger will be the third Chancellor of the Mark Brandenburg, who came from Kulmbach. He died in 1529. 1522. The important painter Hans Suess von Kulmbach, who worked in Krakow, Kulmbach and Nuremberg, dies in Nuremberg. 1523. Margrave George the Pious acquires the Silesian city of Jagerndorf with surrounding lands. This property remains in the possession of the Frankish Hohenzollern until 1603. 1528. The Reformation is introduced in the capital and residence city of Kulmbach and thus throughout the Principality of Kulmbach. 1553. On the November 26, 1553, the Konradetag, the city is destroyed in the War of the States. 1554. On the October 21, 1554, the Plassenburg is dragged by the federal troops. 1559. Beginning of the glorious reconstruction of the Plassenburg under Margrave Georg Friedrich. State fortress and residence of the Hohenzollern until 1604. 1575. Fever epidemic in Kulmbach. 1602. Diphtheria is raging in the city. 1603. Relocation of the residents to Bayreuth. The successor of Margrave George Friedrich becomes Margrave Christian, 1603 to 1655. Since the castle became too cold and damp and no longer corresponded to the beginning of the courtly splendor of absolutism, the new sovereign moved his residence to Bayreuth, where he had a magnificent city palace built. 1605. Due to a huge fire disaster in Bayreuth, the residence will be moved back to Kulmbach. 1616. A plague-like plague claims many victims in the city. 1621. During the 30 Years' War, the residence is once again moved to Kulmbach for safety reasons. 1632. The smallpox is raging terribly in the region. 1634. Imperial troops burn on the 18th October the city, the population of the city and the environment flee to the Plassenburg. Once again, there are countless deaths due to smallpox. 1642. The residence is now finally moved to Bayreuth. Kulmbach is losing its political importance. 1666. This year, Jacob Elrod sketched the city's first known floor plan. 1686. The alchemist Baron Kronman, who enjoyed great prestige in the city, is exposed as an impostor and executed by the gallows. 1691. The Ruhr is rampant in Kulmbach. 1691–1694. The construction of the Langheimer Anshof is based on the plans of Leonard Dientzenhofer. 1704. Nathaniel Lumschers from Kulmbach prints the 100th anniversary calendar. It was a collection of nature observations and various pieces of advice written by the Langheim abbot Mauritius Nauer, 1649–1664. 1709. The first regularly operating stagecoach connection will be established between Bayreuth and Kulmbach. 1732. Salzburg refugees arrive in Kulmbach. 1735. The Ruhr returns to Kulmbach after 1691. 1738–1739. The hospital church is built by city architect Johann Georg Hoffmann. 1752. Johann Georg Hoffmann builds the town hall. The facade was designed by Saint Pierre. 1761. The spotted fever spreads during the 7-Year War in Kulmbach. 1777. Margrave Alexander rents an extensive contingent of troops to the King of Great Britain George III. The soldiers are used against the rebels in the American War of Independence. Only a third return home. 1790. The Baron Karl August von Hardenberg takes up his service as minister. 1792. Margrave Karl Friedrich Alexander steps down and leaves his lands to his cousin, the Prussian king. He himself travels to London with his lover Lady Elizabeth Craven. 1792–1794. The Plassenburg becomes a prisoner of war camp for French troops. 1250 soldiers are imprisoned. 1795. Thanks to the work of Hardenberg, we know about the number of inhabitants of Kulmbach. There are 2,480 inhabitants living in the city, plus 860 members of the military who are stationed on the Plassenburg. 1806. Napoleon's troops occupied Kulmbach. Napoleon had parts of the Plassenburg ground. From now on until 1928 it served as a hospital, forced labor house, prison, prisoner of war camp. 1810. The Zilurian territories become part of the new Bavarian kingdom. 1846. Kulmbach's connection to the König Ludwig Süd-Nordbahn. 1847. The main station building of the Kulmbach station will be put into operation. 1850. Foundation of the mechanical cotton spinning. 1882. In Kulmbach, 26 breweries compete for the favor of the beer drinkers. 1884. Foundation of the Malzereie Muesdorf. 1890. Kulmbach receives the status of a district-in-district city. 1908. Opening of the local train from Kulmbach to Thurno. 1929. Foundation of the German Tin Figure Museum. 1933. Seizure of power by the NSDAP in Kulmbach. 1939. First Beer Week on the Market Square. 1945. American troops invade Kulmbach without a fight. 1946. On the 2nd in December 1946, the Bavarian people gave themselves a new, democratic constitution. 1972. In the area reform, the two districts of Stadtsteinach and Kulmbach were merged. Joint headquarters is Kulmbach. 1973. First beer week in the Bierstadel on the central parking lot. 1999. Opening Landscape Museum Obermain. 2004. About 30,000 inhabitants live in Kulmbach. 2004. Opening Hohenzollers Museum. Kulmbach had on 31. December 2024 around 26,625 inhabitants. On the June 30, 2025, a population of 26,616 is given. Famous is the Kulmbacher bratwurst, a sausage with a high proportion of veal, which is traditionally eaten in the Kulmbacher Bratwurststollen, a long, substantial bun seasoned with anise. To match, the Starkbier EKU from Kulmbach Brauerei AG is served in Kulmbach, which was long considered the strongest in the world. Probably the most famous Kulmbacher is Thomas Gottschalk. The TV entertainer was born in Bamberg, but grew up in Kulmbach. His parents lived in the city until their death. By the way, the city is also referred to as the secret capital of beer, as there are many well-known breweries and types of beer in the region. For example, Kulmbacher is one of the best-known brands in Germany. The July 29, 1939. In Kulmbach, a historic day that is indispensable in the city's history, the first Kulmbach Beer Festival was opened in a tent on the market square. Initiators at the time were the city of Kulmbach and the four Kulmbach breweries EKU, Montschaft, Reichel, and Sandler. They wanted to make public the reputation of the Bierstadt Kulmbach and the excellent quality of the Kulmbach beer. Since then, the Kulmbacher Beer Week takes place once a year. Only during the war was the beer festival interrupted, and in 1952 it was cancelled again due to polio. At the time, it was marveled from all sides that four competing breweries were each pouring their own festive beer together in a tent. The most famous legend about the White Woman has its origin on the Plassenburg ob Kulmbach and is linked to the Hohenzollern family. Bergerin Kunigund, widow of Count Otto von Orlemund, had fallen in love with Albrecht the Fair, son of the Nuremberg Burggrave Friedrich IV. He spread that he would marry her if there were no four eyes in the way. This meant his parents, who rejected such a connection. However, Kunigund misunderstood the news and referred it to her two children, a 2-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy. She stabbed the children in the head with a needle and killed them.
Gracias.